accessory to Stewart.
Like what do you mean a teenage access, like a sidekick kind of thing?
Yeah, basically a sidekick most of the time.
Kind of to legitimize him, or
well, having a big family and the traditional Montana family, not traditional Montana family, but
there's some Mormon in
standard
this
large
mix,
family,
right?
It's sorry, what was that last part?
There's talking to your mom. There's some kind of Mormon influence somewhere down the road. I don't know, mother-in-law or somebody, or so. Oh, by the way, the
entire family is Mormon.
Okay, now your Stewart, you'd call him Stewart. He's your dad, though, right?
Yep. Yes.
Okay. Now I also found your mom's story about your grandmother fascinating. This Las Vegas person.
Oh yes, that's a lot of the groundwork for who Stewart would become once he found his audience was all in how Dusty Buckle carried herself through her life. I have to let that yapping dog in real quick.
Okay. I mean, come on, Dusty Buckle. There's
assumed name Dusty Buckle. She just stuck with.
So were you close to her? Did you see her a lot, or?
During the time that we lived in Las Vegas, which was several years off and on because we bounced around the country so often, but frequently back to Vegas. Yes, we saw her all the time because she made a real effort to stay at like the center. Make up your mind where you want to be. At the center.
Have you ever heard the expression, a dog is always on the wrong side of the door?
Yeah, he doesn't know what he wants from life. I see him out there trying to figure out where he wants to go.
There he goes.
But yeah, she all family holidays were held at her house. She had to always be at the center of things. Every family event, every church event, every charity drive, all the things that she was involved with.
Remind me now, what was her shtick? Like religion or
New Age, crystal healing, associated Christianity. So it's kind of a syncretism of New Age, positive energy.
There's a tie-in between the whole QAnon / militia / right wing and this New Age,
it used to be that the New Age
thing.
It used to be that the New Age predominantly left-leaning New Age crystal healing people were the main anti-vaxxers. You can even see old Simpsons episodes from a simpler time, like talking about like, oh, this place isn't too progressive. Everyone vaccinates their children, and the shift was incredibly like the pivot, starting with that quack doctor out of the UK to people who were suspicious. I believe it was people who were suspicious of state-run healthcare absorbed the anti-vax thing as ammunition, and that bled into people like on the conservative right and libertarian right in the United States. And that was from what I remember, that was also Stewart's main objection to Obamacare, was that it would one day be used as the healthcare system would be used as a lever to control the population. And through that, the anti-vax sentiment percolated into the conservative right as ammunition against socialized healthcare, because it was a very handy dart and you could mobilize lots of concerned parents with it by sounding scientific. And once it got kind of wrapped up in the whole mythos, like the conditions were more and more ripe for someone to use the anti-vax thing as a major talking point to get leverage with conservative voting and donor bases. And then what you have with QAnon is, I've paid a lot of attention to QAnon. There's a lot of QAnon wrapped up people in my town, like where I live, associated with like people that I used to work with, people that I know, fully wrapped up in it. They think that the rapture is coming, and QAnon foretells all of it. And it's because it's a kind of terrifying cyberpunk evolution of the conspiracy theory, and that every successful conspiracy theory is absorbed into the greater QAnon Borg so it can become as adaptive and contagious and vicious as possible and succeed in as many avenues as possible. And now there's a million branches, and some of them are going to be around forever. I think some of them are going to become organized religion that forever rally. And I think it's Dallas, where they're waiting for JFK Jr. to come back forever. That's exactly how the Seventh-day Adventists started. Really. Yeah, it's just everybody was in a field standing on haystacks in robes waiting for the return of Jesus on this date calculated.
Now it's John Kennedy. They're waiting for the return.
Now it's JFK Jr., the Playboy son who died in a plane crash and never did anything political in his life. He's the one that faked his death and has been on the run because JFK would be implausibly old at this point, and there's kind of video of him dying.
He'd be dead, wouldn't he? He'd be like 100 or something.
Right? Yeah, unless they bring in the whole medbed thing, which is a very strange QAnon avenue that I really haven't read a lot about. I don't know where that came from, but I've watched.
What's the med where he's in suspended animation someplace?
No, like Star Trek healing technology, kind of like the heal everything tanning beds in like Elysium.
Oh,
if you saw that movie, or Star Wars Back to Tank for people who know more familiar with that. The basic sci-fi idea and the theory is that this technology has been suppressed by the deep state, but there's a whole bunch of specifics to it.
Why don't they use something real? Like, Walt Disney is in Frozen, waiting for a cure. There's cryogenic.
Yeah, the whole cryogenic freezing thing. Honestly,
why don't they use that? I mean, there's a modicum of truth in that, but is that why they don't use it? Because it actually makes sense.
Well, here's the thing: if you created a handle for yourself and posted for a while on any given QAnon board, and then strung together a convincing narrative, and this is the important part: if you photoshopped some handy, easily shareable infographics that can be copied a million times without the JPEG compression, making it unreadable, you could bring Walt Disney's Frozen head into the QAnon mythos yourself. And as long as it's something that gets play, the vague, shadowy puppet masters behind it, like, oh man, what was it? Is he a Watkins? Is it Tim Watkins or something? The 8chan guy. I can't believe I forgot his name.
I'm not an expert on any of that. I'm sorry.
I'm
in a bubble.
The actual pedophile behind who later controlled the QAnon account would promote
the pig
your
farmer
Frozen
guy?
Disney version. What's that?
The pig. I thought a pig farmer was the original QAnon guy. But do you know who this?
There have been a number of Qs. It's a mask, and there's some evidence that the Q handle was sold for cash multiple times, and just handed off to people who could better exploit it. And now,
where do you think? Where does General Flynn fall into this whole QAnon thing, in your opinion?
General Flynn saw it as a handy lever to use because it's absolutely perfect for generating a deniable mob who will vote however you say and react with and go as far as threats and intimidation and violence against any opponent that you pick out, and you never have to directly order them to do anything as long as they think you have an inside line to their mystery prophet who was never a real person. Then all you have to do is imply in a highly specific way that they've been programmed to read a ton into. It's all conditioning to read between the lines, and if you imply and push them in a certain direction, they'll interpret your orders and go and try to bomb something or leave death threats at the house of someone running against your chosen candidate. And you never have to directly incriminate yourself while you're dealing with them. And then all you have to do is the guy who owns a QAnon handle, you get him an influential position, collecting a huge salary, running a super PAC, and keep him happy. And of course, QAnon being what it is, and like my fascination with QAnon came from seeing it take root in my town. And the people that got drawn into it, everybody that used to be a sovereign citizen, everybody who was deeply evangelical, apocalyptic Christian, they've all been drawn into one or another flavor of QAnon, and now they won't shut up about it, and that's all that's on their Facebooks. They're completely wrapped up in it in their daily lives, and they are trying to evangelize.
You mentioned there's people at work. Where do you work?
Oh, right now I do construction.
Okay, now in this, how many people at work are there? Like 20?
Oh, I work for a very small company, but I've worked. Let's see.
Well, in your circle of work people and stuff like that, what percentage of them?
10 people that I know personally in a relatively small-ish area, like a regular Eureka, in the Eureka area.
Mm-hmm.
People that I know personally who are fully wrapped up in QAnon, out of the people that I happen to know by name that I've run into where Facebook has brought their posts up to me, and they all have friends and relatives and associates who engage with them when they post or talk about QAnon on social media. And most of those people are also in this area.
And so how do they handle when virtually, well, none of these prophecies come true?
Well, they just keep waiting, and they justify it. And the continuing to wait and 2 more weeks and finding something else.
I mean, you book a trip to Dallas to wait for somebody to show up who's supposed to show up and he doesn't show up. I mean, how many times can you do that to somebody before they figure like maybe?
Well, some people get burnt out, and some people decide that what they should do while they wait is drink diluted industrial bleach, which is people with relatives. Somebody said that their grandmother who was at that rally, and that's the thing, is these are people who were super vulnerable to conspiracy theory mindsets. I've known people who got very temporarily wrapped up in QAnon theory when it was a hot button topic in the news. See them get fully spun up about it. They could not be convinced that it was nonsense, could not be convinced that it was fake or a hoax, and just deflected and told, like, Dakota, you're getting too wrapped up about politics. Go take a walk. It's like you're the one reposting links to a website saying that Washington, D.C. is going to be turned into a prison camp, and the new American capital is going to be built around Mar-a-Lago because our country is a fake corporation run by the Queen of England or something. And it was when the sovereign citizen stuff got absorbed and incorporated into QAnon and fully integrated that it became somewhat viral in my town. But that penetration into more regular people who are somewhat conspiracy theory minded, they did burn out when nothing happened. And when the predictions kept failing to come true, they did burn out on it, and then they left and realized it was ridiculous. It's the people that have been fully wrapped up in theories like the sovereign citizens or the Freeman movement or certain strains of super apocalypse Christianity or like white nationalism are vulnerable to being drawn into it forever because it's just a grander, more immediate version of what they already believed in that gives them commonality with a ton of other conspiracy theory schools of thought. I'm going to go tend to that dog again.
Yeah, no problem.
I don't know. Sometimes I suspect that there is a highly specific, just completely unrecognized form of mental illness that is latent in the population. It's the kind of thing that makes people look at like a legal code around driver's licenses and view it the way that like students of the occult look at grimoires from, or like Renaissance alchemy books, or like magic spell books, and then they look at the strange hyperfixation on secret societies operating in plain sight and tiny, highly specific details. And I keep seeing like the same almost phrasing and hyperfixation cropping up in, because my entire life I was exposed to sovereign citizen people. They were always around Stewart. They were always trying to get into his good graces and worm their way into Oath Keepers to gain more leverage.
Now, I'm ignorant of all this stuff, but believe it or not, I grew up in Chicago, and
sorry, I've been ranting for a while.
No, that's okay. Just to give some perspective to this, it just blows me away because when I grew up, we had a family from downstate Illinois, and there's Chicago and Illinois, and then there's the rest of the state. And people from Chicago never go downstate. It's like whatever. But anyway, a family moved in, and this was the south suburbs in the 60s and 70s, and they were a white supremacist family, and I mean the whole town was shocked. I mean, I didn't even know there was such a thing. My mom had to explain it to me that this family had moved in. I was going to high school at that point, and I remember his name. His name was Larry Kuehl, and he wore a white T-shirt and used the N-word openly. And there were 2,500 kids in my school, and everybody hated Larry Kuehl. I mean, to call him an outcast was, I mean, he was a pariah. He was just like somebody had landed from another planet. So this is not 1%, whatever one of 2,500. I mean, it's this tiny, tiny, tiny thing. And as far as apocalypse people, that was a comic you saw in the New Yorker about the guy in the robe with the beard saying, the end of the world is coming. And it was a joke. So there was always this crazy stuff, but I'm talking not even fringe. I mean, not 1%, like less than 1%, things you heard of, whatever. And it's just been that tiny little speck of idiocy has been amplified to the point where, that Trump won an election on complete nonsense and lies. And, how did we convince, 50 million people, 70 million people, whatever, that there is no reality? I mean, it's an astounding accomplishment.
Some insight into that because I was completely wrapped up in Trump's spell in 2016.
Were you old? You weren't old enough to vote, were you?
Oh yeah, I was. Oh, yeah. My first
Did you voted election, for Donald Trump?
My first ever election, I voted for Donald J. Trump.
And why did you vote for Donald? Why did you think he would make a better candidate, a better president than Hillary Clinton? I mean, what possible redeeming value could you see in this bloated, old, pompous idiot?
So the main thing that made him stick in people's minds was, first of all, that he was entertaining. Hillary Clinton is probably the greatest sin was being a fairly standard politician.
He's not funny. He has never cracked a real joke. I mean, he makes
his statements are hilarious, taken out of context as like, I don't know, almost a performance art piece.
Oh my God! Like but his speeches are just this
saying madness.
But the rallies, even Trumpers get bored at his rallies.
Well, that's the thing. I never went to a rally. I never really listened to any of his speeches.
He probably never came. Did he ever come to Montana?
Awareness of his platform. I knew that he was not actually a constitutionalist candidate.
He doesn't even know what the Constitution is.
Incredibly troubled past. I was dead set against him for a while, but the thing was, I was also a frequent user on like anonymous message boards like 4chan, and the
Yeah, I've never met any
once
I've never met any. That's how what a liberal urban bubble I live in, that I've
well,
never
I
met
could tell that
anybody.
from what you said earlier because you're talking about white supremacists in like so this was the 1960s, you said.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
actually
around that same
right late
time is when
1960s, early
a
70s actually.
ton of, if you look at the history of doomsday cults, especially ones that end up in murder or mass suicide, the vast majority of them got their start in the beginning of the 1960s. And there was still incredibly strong, organized white supremacist movements in many parts of the country that in many parts of the country simply owned the local police.
Oh well,
So they
yeah,
never got
yeah,
reported.
and
Up until the
maybe
70s, there
maybe it
was
was
that one.
self-delusion on the part of America to just pretending, and we're still in that
It's
thing.
yeah, it's
It's like this is
underneath
going to
the
go
surface.
away,
That
and
current has always been there. But the thing is that makes it highly relevant is at that time, the hippie movement was falling apart. In many ways, we were in a state of national disillusion and disillusionment, and people looking for answers were highly vulnerable to cult thinking and violent political movements and fringe movements. And that's where you would see, as the civil rights movement would start to gain speed, the KKK and white nationalist groups would start to get their act together and go hard to try and counter it. And what we're seeing now is the return fire over the presidency of Barack Obama in many ways, as far
oh
as
yeah, I agree with
explicit
that. That
white
was
nationalism goes. I'm just like, it was making the rounds on the internet just a little bit ago of early 70s video footage of pro civil rights protesters and members of a state communist party group that they were meeting with that were ambushed and murdered by members of the KKK in broad daylight in the city street. It was all caught on video, and no one was ever charged
what
because
city?
all. Oh, I can't remember. I just saw the video a while ago, and it was people were talking about like doing some analysis of it because it was just a bunch of middle-aged white dudes with shotguns running around in the street,
Wow.
really not even really any grasp of tactics. It just had a bunch of guys with guns that all showed up at once, like kind of almost like weird hesitancy in like running around and like going out into the open to finish people off. They killed 7 people.
Good grief. Have you
I
ever
will
heard of
see
the
it.
Students
I,
for a Democratic Society, the SDS?
that sounds
That
vaguely familiar, but
that was a left-wing student group. I didn't join, but I had friends that were in it that were actually a little bit older than I was. It was kind of a radical. They were not quite bomb throwing, but right on the edge of that kind of thing.
weather underground kind of
Yeah,
thing.
that kind of stuff. That kind of stuff. But anyway, getting back. Here's my whole thing on QAnon, all this nonsense, the militias, everything.
Well, we were
My
just
theory
the
is
state of this country. We were psychologically primed for something to happen, and QAnon was just the one that survived the cauldron of the internet and became a successful strain.
right,
And
but
people in power were going to use whatever took root as a lever.
my theory of all of this is it's just a massive psyop or whatever you want because we have, big oil, big pharma, big corporations. They want their taxes lowered, and uh, they want to do their thing unregulated, and that's, I mean, there's only 700 billionaires in all of America. 700. There's not enough millionaires, that benefit from these policies, so they have to dupe these poorly educated people in Idaho and Montana to actually vote against their own interest.
Well,
And they're
that's
not
the
going to.
interesting thing is there are a lot of conservatives that accidentally espouse leftist views, like advocating for dismantling big pharma, breaking up tech monopolies, employee-owned companies, getting rid of corporate personhood, but they never ever phrase them in the same language as someone on the left side of the spectrum would. There are people who work in farm co-ops where all cost and profit is shared evenly between everyone involved that insist that they're anti-socialist.
That's like the definition of communism. Is
Yeah, no, they're
co-ops
actually living in farmer communes, like the kind of communes that you would see in the Soviet Union or early in the history of Israel, when Israel was very leftist. And they are, just because they have in their head socialism and leftism associated with, inextricably, with centralized top-down authoritarian power structures and big government, that they cannot be convinced that they're spouting a leftist talking point. Well, and they won't hear of it, and it's because their worldview does not allow that to be included. But I can shed a little bit of light on the Donald Trump thing, and for me, a lot of it was just the pure self-interest of, because one of the main things that was used was that Hillary Clinton was going to start a million brush fire wars, and we were going to have a draft because we were going to be committing soldiers to a land war with Russia and the Ukraine. Like, they shouldn't refer to them as the Ukraine. That's Russian propaganda. In Ukraine and Syria and Libya and everything else, going off of her track record and involvement with the overthrow of Gaddafi and the attempt of the Obama administration to sound out whether there was popular support for military intervention in Syria with the U.S. military. And that was the shtick that they ran with. And mostly it was so I didn't want to get drafted to go fight Russia on any of the major fronts that we would have been.
Did you believe she was corrupt?
Oh, absolutely.
And what did you, what was it, the emails? I mean, what did she do that you thought was...
When I got fully wrapped up into it, there was a point in time where, just like my entire social circle, I wholeheartedly believed in Pizzagate.
Oh my God.
I was completely sold. And it's hilarious that my entire childhood, I believed that I was always on the correct side. And yes, I was as deep in the programming as you can possibly get. Yes.
The whole pedophile ring in the basement. Okay, here's my thing on QAnon. I mean, do you know who Julie Brown is? The reporter that blew the Epstein, got the Epstein case going again?
I'm not familiar with Julie Brown. I know
she's a reporter with the Miami Herald.
I know there were a lot of jokes about a guy named Ronan, especially when Guardians of the Galaxy came out and started photoshopping his head onto the supervillain.
Yeah, he's a writer for the New Yorker, right? And he's written the expose books. No, Julie Brown was the one that, looked in, because Epstein was arrested in the 90s for pedophilia and given a slap on the wrist. I don't know if you've ever watched the old Andy and Mayberries, where the drunk comes in and he's got the key to the cell and comes and goes as he wants. He had that kind of setup. I mean, it was absolutely ridiculous. Acosta was the U.S. prosecutor who Trump then made the Secretary of Commerce or something? I don't know. Transportation?
Yeah, he gave him some kind of high-ranking cabinet position. I do recall that another Trump appointee was one of the people who helped with the most recent sweetheart plea agreement, which gave immunity to his co-conspirators.
To everyone. I mean, that is just absolutely unheard of.
Just blanket immunity to all his co-conspirators.
I mean, anybody that might have been a conspirator that shows up in the future, I mean, that is the most ridiculous agreement ever. And she exposed all that and drove it, and then eventually he got arrested. And I think my conspiracy theory, is that the powers that be, Trump and who else is on, taking advantage of, was having sex with children on this, billionaire level. And, the Prince of England, Prince Andrew. We know Clinton was on the plane, but there's no evidence that he was actually a pedophile or anything like that. But,
he went, there is testimony that he specifically dodged his social security Secret Service detail and went on the plane without his Secret Service detail, and was
He dodged a Secret
before.
Service detail to go to McDonald's
Yeah,
when he was
before it
president.
was. Yeah, and that's why it was so noteworthy, as there was testimony that he had went on this plane without the Secret Service detail, and generally, you're not supposed to do that. Like the Secret Service will live with the Bush family on their farm. They live like they have people with Jimmy Carter 24/7. You have round the clock protection as an ex-president.
Right.
And they're like, people are saying, "Oh, well, Bill Clinton like this apologia for Bill Clinton that's springing up." Bill Clinton was as much of a longtime associate of Donald Trump as anybody else. And that is what initially wrapped me up in Pizzagate, is it was not yet
Well,
confirmed
Trump used to be a big Democratic donor.
Oh yeah, Trump was a huge New York Democratic Party player. That's why the Clintons went to his wedding.
Of course, wherever there's money, you're going to find,
Yeah, he had nothing
politicians.
but praise for Hillary Clinton as Secretary of State
Yep.
until he got wrapped up in the birther conspiracy, because it got him attention, and then Obama started roasting him, and then he took it very, very, very personally.
Oh my God, that was a moment.
That was a pivotal moment in American history, as it would turn out.
I mean, when a narcissist gets like
dinner
burned on that level, I mean,
by the president of the United States,
he got his revenge. He destroyed the fucking country
that we've had in probably 20 years. Yes, that will stick in your craw just a bit. But no, it was that. So that was what initially drew me in. Was also a lot of it was Stewart's absolute fear of Hillary Clinton becoming president was infectious, and that deep fear that once Hillary Clinton was president, everyone in the militia, right, was going to get a knock on their door in the middle of the night and taken to a secure location with a black bag on their head, using hilariously.
Okay, I got it. All right,
yeah,
I
we
gotta
back way
ask
up.
some questions. Okay, now that brings to mind, you've mentioned a couple things, that Q has a salary, and then you start talking about your dad and his motivations.
Sorry,
and
so a
stuff
bunch
like
of that
this.
was tangents that are
No,
a lot
that's
of that is
okay.
investigative reporting that's publicly available. What I should really be talking about is the stuff that I have personal knowledge of.
And we'll get there. We'll get there. I just have some other. I have a theory that nobody seems to be. Okay. All right. This is about your dad. These are things. Okay. More of my background. Now it's been probably 20 years, but I was a corporate guy, and you've heard of Mitsubishi. We used to be bigger than we are now in the public mind, but we used to be huge in big screens. We made the first really high quality big screens. Everybody went out and they were not on the wall. They took like a truck and 3 people to bring them into your house, and they weighed 500 pounds.
Home theater systems.
Yes, yeah, gigantic stuff like that. But we were huge. We were a $1 billion company, and I made it up to national warranty manager, because when I was down below, I was a warranty fraud analyst. So it was my job to sniff out crooks that were using our warranty system to make money illegally. And I just wrote some really simple computer programs that I didn't actually write them. I had a guy write them for me. I told him, what I want this program to do. And it was extremely simple, just comparing national and international failure rates by model number, and then we'd look at the failure rate of the different dealers. And so if the failure rate is 2% nationally, why is it 75% at your dealership? This is not genius stuff. But then I would go and talk to these.
So a lot of times it would be. So would there be dealerships making a profit somehow off of warranty scams?
Yeah, no, this is what they would do. So these TV sets, they were like, pianos. Is that a piano behind you?
Yes, it is.
Okay. They were like that. They were that, that big and that heavy. So, when you buy one at the store, the big problem is like, oh, how am I going to get it home? That's not something you throw in the trunk. And so they wanted the stores to be competitive, because there was kind of price fixing going on, would say, well, we offer free delivery. And so to offset the cost of the free delivery, they would file a warranty claim that say the set was broken and we had to send these guys out there to repair it because of like in-home repair, which is, it was about a $200.
So they would balance the in-home repair cost against
with a fraudulent warranty claim. And then we would send them the $200 to pay their service technician. And then to back up their thing, they would buy the part, which is like $5 and, throw it in the garbage because they never, the sets weren't breaking down. So anyway.
So you got really good at pattern recognition for when people are grifting a system.
Exactly. I should have been a cop. I can smell when people are lying or when something's not right. Detectives call it hinky. Something's hinky, right? When they talk to a person, cops can tell. A good detective, my uncle's a retired Chicago cop. A good cop can tell like 10 seconds into a conversation whether somebody's yanking their chain or not. Okay, and but what I want to get, a guy whose mother is Dusty Buckle, who's like, an early time, there have been scammers, there have been snake oil sales. It's part of America. These people are actually.
That was just what she did. Is she was always involved in some kind of weird real estate project that never quite seemed to work out, but the bills would get paid somehow.
Yeah, exactly. And I know somebody in Colorado that's at a Supermax in Colorado, next to the Unabomber, which is a wild place. Have you heard about this Supermax place in Colorado? It's where they send the Unabomber.
I have not, but I'm 50 miles away from the Unabomber's cabin.
Right.
Yeah, right. His cabin is not too far away from our county courthouse here.
Okay. Well, I mean, that place is wild. They have it set up so they can't see anything on the outside. They have these berms and the angles of the things, so they don't even know which way, north, south, east. It's just a crazy place. But anyway, again, talk about tangents. But so my theory, I have some more specific questions. Okay, that'll help this thing, right? Especially when we do it for real.
Yeah, we're gonna have to narrow this down quite a bit.
Well, Adam's really good at editing. He'll chop out whatever you want, and stuff like that. He's a Canadian out of, which is kind of weird too. But so here's a guy that was raised by basically a con person, right?
Yep, and con people love, especially unofficial churches that sort of meet in people's houses.
Oh yeah, I think
multi-level marketing, all that, and that's the environment that he percolated. That it all percolated into his system. He absorbed it all through osmosis.
And the con guy, they don't believe the con. They know they're conning, and they have no respect for the people they're conning. They have lots of respect for other con men. They're on this upper level up here. Okay, and your dad is obviously a smart guy, but here's some specific questions. All right, and I know I asked you about this before on DMs and Twitter. It doesn't make his career path makes no sense.
That's because he doesn't. His logic is not the same as your or my logic. His basic behavior is operating on a different mechanism.
I'm just talking basic, life facts. Okay, my brother-in-law is my sister's married a lawyer. From her father was president of Vulcan Materials. Vulcan Materials is an aggregate company. They take rock and make it into little rocks, okay? And then those rocks end up in cement. Sounds really boring. You're talking to the dog or a sibling?
There's somebody standing behind the computer muttering to themselves while
Are they eavesdropping?
No, just kind of wandering through the living room.
That's okay. Well, whatever. if you want to,
that's fine.
Anyway, he had every talk about white privilege. He grew up in Flossmoor. It's a really nice suburb of Chicago. Dad is president of a gigantic corporation, okay? And fantastic grades. And so he wants to go to Yale Law, get a Yale law degree, all right? They pulled every string, okay? He couldn't get it. He ended up going to Johnstown, which really, there's Harvard, Yale, and Georgetown. It's like
Okay,
number
yeah.
three.
I was just thinking that I've never heard of
That's
Johnstown in my
Johnstown. No,
life.
Georgetown. Georgetown Law is a good place to go. In Annapolis, Maryland, right? And so, I mean, I know how incredibly difficult it is to get into Yale.
And he definitely played every possible advantage he had. He played being the token conservative in a
okay. Did they?
mostly
I don't think they look at
that.
That's not on the application. Race, that would be huge. Okay, if he were black, I can see that.
He really played up the very little bit of Hispanic that he was, and I think a lot of that happened.
1/8 Cherokee. Wait a minute, I didn't know about the Hispanic. That's right.
Yeah, he never shuts up. He might now that he's associating with friends of white supremacists, but a whole career he never shut up about being a quarter Mexican.
I did look at that the Oath Keepers didn't start out at all white supremacists.
In his own mind, and this is not a cameras rolling thing like while he's in front of newscasters. This is like ranting to me while I'm picking him up from the airport as a teenager. In his personal mythos, Stewart Rhodes is, and this is a direct quote, the deadliest fucking threat to white supremacists worldwide. He's an anti-racist warrior for American democracy in his personal hero's narrative that exists inside his head. And he's probably maintaining that fantasy to himself, but he's willing to do absolutely anything to stay out of prison, which is why he's continuing to hang out with Proud Boys and Lawyers for Trump now that they are within friends of friends circles with the likes of Christian Identity and Patriot Front.
Yeah, it's part of the package.
He's just absorbed. He's taken the deal with the devil to try to stay out of prison, and it might backfire on him because they didn't succeed.
How does he go from valet parking cars in Las Vegas? Okay, it seems here's my warranty fraud connection. Okay, the only thing that makes sense to go from parking cars at the fake pyramid or wherever he was working to Yale Law. What's different? What's different is Ron Paul, who is also, if you look at him, this libertarian and stuff like that. If you look at some of his stuff back then, it's very anti-government.
Yeah, Ron Paul was, I'd say, almost a front runner for the anarcho-capitalist movement, which that's a hilariously self-defeating school of thought. But yeah, I'm a huge proponent of Austrian economics, huge proponent of small government, strict interpretations of all constitutional amendments, constitutional, originist, read everything through a framer's intent interpretation.
Well, how did he get that? You were too young, but maybe you know this. How did he get the job with Ron Paul? How do you go from parking cars in Las Vegas to working for Ron Paul, who's not even in Nevada?
I think it would have been a connection because he wrote a lot of like libertarian op-eds, but I'm fuzzy on the timeline of that. I actually genuinely don't know. That would be a question for Tasha. I genuinely don't know how he got connected with Ron Paul. He worked for him as a fairly low-level staffer. He was well-liked because he was very eloquent.
Where was he living when he was working as a staffer?
Oh, this was Las Vegas again.
Okay, but what connection does Ron Paul have to Las Vegas? Was he like running a local office or working?
No. No, he was working as a staffer for Ron Paul. This would have been in Virginia. We're living in Virginia. Stewart was commuting into Washington, D.C. to work at Ron Paul's office in Congress as a staffer.
And why did you move to Virginia? Just for that job?
So Stewart could be a staffer for Ron Paul, because it was a major networking and opportunity and a step up.
Okay, so then
this would have been coming out of going to college at UNLV, I believe.
So give me a date, like a year.
I am horrible with
how
dates.
old were you?
Young enough that I don't have coherent memories of anything except watching Melody Time a lot, and my mom fussing over me while we were walking in the woods in case I picked up ticks, because Virginia has a lot of ticks. Basically, I was young. I was young enough that I don't really have many coherent memories of that whole time. It was a very early childhood. I actually cannot. That's one thing I'm terrible with. Early in the timeline, I don't have a lot of hard numbers.
Okay, maybe early 2000s.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I was born in 1997, so that would have been early 2000s.
Okay, and then so now you're in Virginia, and he's a staffer, and then the next step is Yale Law, right?
After bouncing back to Las Vegas and living there for a while at my maternal grandmother's house.
Your mom's mom. Is she normal?
She was pretty normal. She was definitely an interesting woman. A weird mix of strangely progressive, but also very obviously like time capsule 1940s Mormon.
Oh, that's the Mormon part.
Yes, did you guys have whole family 50, is the Mormon part?
50 boxes of Cheerios in the cabinets, like every Mormon I've ever met. I lived in Grand Junction, Colorado for quite a while.
So whole basement full of storage food.
Oh, there we go.
All the canned stuff, the good freeze-dried mashed potato mix. The kind that gets used in restaurants. You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. Actually, my son told me the secret of that. He worked in a restaurant, and he said, and it was a good restaurant. He said, "Dad, don't you know everything comes in those boiling bags?" Like, really?
Yep. The Mormon canneries take the quality of their freeze-dried foods very seriously, and they all do like cookie dough and fruit punch and stuff along with basic staples, because the intent is to be, instead of focusing on the end of the world, the intent is to just live through the end times and come out of the other end of the tribulation okay. And sometimes you're going to want to make chocolate chip cookies going through all the trials of the end times. So that's it's a weirdly hopeful look at end time, view of end times theology, which is not something that was reflected in the militia movement at all. Like, the militia movement, where it intersects with evangelical Christianity, is all about the fire and doom of the end and the coming of the Antichrist and all of that. But yeah, and then from there to Yale Law.
Yeah. And who did he get a scholarship? I mean, because that's like a $300,000 education.
And from a very poor background, well, there is well over $100,000 in student loan debt, but that is mostly private loans for living expenses.
Oh, so
there's a significant amount of student loan debt. I think approaching.
He wants Biden to cancel student loan debt like everybody else on Twitter.
Oh, I'm sure he would accept it, but I'm sure if he were on Twitter talking about it, he would be advocating against it, because he just simply plans to never pay it off. I don't think he's ever made a single payment on his student loans.
Okay.
He's going to keep dodging it forever.
Nobody has. So as long as the subject of money is up, the other thing that doesn't add up is the number of oath keepers is like thrown around 200,000, 100,000. Your mom says probably 35,000 at the peak.
There might have been 100,000 people who subscribed to Oath Keepers ideology who were in.
I'm talking dues-paying members.
Dues-paying members, I believe 30,000. It was lower than that.
That is a huge income stream. That is okay.
And that's
40,000. Your mom said like $50 annual membership. That's $2 million a year.
$200 lifetime memberships, cheaper like $55 associate memberships. Hold on, there's gonna be a bunch of people coming through the living room. So alrighty.
We're back. Okay. Now, how do you power your this outbuilding? Is it an extension cord or is it actually real power?
I'm in the house right now, but I live in I sleep in basically.
Is your mom there? I want to say hi to your mom.
She's here in the background.
Stick her head in. Come on, Tasha.
Say hi.
Can you see anything on that screen? It's so dark.
Hi, Tasha.
Hello. I don't know.
How you doing?
Where's your thing? Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, there it is. Okay.
You're directly above and to the left of my head. Yes. Hello.
How's it going?
Good. This guy's amazing. I mean, we could have a 20-hour show, but that's not going to work. This is just the pre-interview. We're not doing the real thing. We're just bouncing some stuff around.
Oh, cool.
I would love to have 20 hours of me talking and trying to sound smart floating around the internet because I'm a huge narcissist. But for the sake of people who actually want to listen to it, we'd probably keep it shorter than that.
Like I said, the editing is up to Adam. I just find people.
If you keep letting me go on tangents, he's gonna have to just take up Dennis Villeneuve's scalpel and just cut.
Well, I've already asked your mom. We're on the same subject. I asked your mom. I don't know why you guys why Stewart isn't a multimillionaire, in a Ferrari.
By all rights, he should have been. That is almost a direct quote from the treasurer of Oath Keepers multiple times. There is no reason why this shouldn't be a multi-million-dollar organization. We should be bigger than the NRA. What the hell is going on? That would be part of.
Well, wasn't it the treasurer's job to handle the money? I mean, that's normally the treasurer.
He's trying to keep a handle on Stewart when it came to money. It's like trying to have a pet bobcat and to have it be an outdoor cat. You're basically just living with a wild animal, and it's not going to be trainable.
I mean, what did the check say? Who had it was Stewart's bank account, right?
So, Oath Keepers bank accounts run through Bank of America. Separate accounts there's like an operations fund and payroll and general expenses, and Stewart's expense account for traveling.
Was he good at the administrative stuff of running an organization?
No, completely.
Why didn't he get in trouble? I've run businesses. I mean, you got to do that stuff. You have to, the payroll has to be accurate. You got to deduct you can't just pay somebody. You have to deduct for FICA and all the other stuff, or you get in big trouble.
Well, that big trouble seems to have not caught up with him yet, because I've never experienced anything as slipshod as the running of Oath Keepers. Like, not in any workplace I have been in since.
So he should have hired. He should have had some boring clerical type person that's good at that stuff. That just to keep him out of trouble. But
that was the Jim Ayal. That was the treasurer's supposed job. But Stewart would just go off plot so often. And
so where did the money go? What does the treasurer think? What is the treasurer saying? Like, hey, where's the money?
Yeah, basically, or trying to figure out why we could never get it together to keep Oath Keepers functioning and
think
keep
about
up the
this.
revenue
Think
stream.
about this. This is a business that has all this income, and most businesses that have this income, they have to deliver something. They have to like ship something out. They have to package it. They have to pay the people to put the thing together. Then they have to. I mean, he got money and didn't have to do anything with it. All he had to do was stick it in the bank. There was zero operating costs. Because the cost of goods sold was zero. That is a dream
Sometimes
organization.
we had brochures.
That's why preachers have Learjets.
Was supposed to get a brochure packet.
This is why TV preachers have Learjets and Ferraris. It's because the cost of goods sold, and the good is basically bullshit. I mean, is
well, that
zero.
And they're completely tax immune. Oath Keepers was never a 501c3.
So what was it? I mean, it still is.
Actually, a sole proprietorship.
A sole
proprietorship.
Oh, God.
Yep. And the board of directors and the state level organizations and everything else that existed underneath him is basically just a clown show.
Okay, so the guys beneath him, say there's, he's the king of the Oath Keepers, and then I know about these different chapters because you see those are the guys that are getting arrested, right?
Yeah, and also a lot of the organizations, the state level organizations that split off and are still quietly doing their own thing.
So their dues go to them. They don't go to. They don't. The sub organizations money goes to the leader of the sub organization, or does it go to Stewart, or does he get
Oath Keepers
cut,
National, which is Stewart and everything but very thin legal name.
Okay, so he gets the money even from the state organizations. I'm telling you.
Yeah, the state organizations were just for organizing in-person Oath Keeper stuff within that state.
I think you should get a metal detector and find the gold bricks in the backyard.
Well, there was gold somewhere. I don't know what happened to it. It was in Las Vegas last I knew.
Oh my God, I was just joking.
What? There was gold in Las Vegas last I knew. I have no idea what happened to it. I remember them talking about it on conference calls. Like, a huge part of my experience with Oath Keepers is just sitting in on multi-hour, incredibly tense conference calls with the treasurer and the vice president, and the vice president and board of directors and everybody else was an ever-rotating cast of characters because they would burn out so quickly on trying to deal with Stewart or treat Oath Keepers like a real organization.
Narcissists are exhausting.
Yeah, they would get exhausted and they would leave, and sometimes they would leave explosively and try to found their own off-brand generic Oath Keepers.
Good luck with that.
And until Oath Keepers as a whole fell apart just recently, those generally weren't very successful because it's all about the name recognition.
Right, exactly.
He
built an amazing brand and the whole thing. I mean, I was talking to Tasha about this when I was newly married in the 90s. There was a thing. What did they call that? Truth Keepers or something? What was that, Tasha?
Promise Keepers?
Promise Keepers, something like that. And I'm an atheist. I'm a devout atheist, lapsed Catholic.
We had a lot of overlap with Promise Keepers, actually.
Yeah, where you go out into the woods with other, husbands and, talk about being a man and talking about being a good family person and stuff like that. And
it's filling a void. There's a void in organized traditional like men's activity stuff in any kind of positive light in modern American culture, and that's where you get a lot of really toxic groups trying to fill that gap the way the CIA tries to fill the gap after a civil war in a third world country. Just go in, plant a controlled group, and use that as a recruiting pipeline for whatever crazy thing you want to do in the future.
Hey, what about this thing? You said something on Twitter about living in a house underground or something like that. What was that? Like an Earthship house or something?
Okay, so
were you just blowing smoke there, or like pulling Twitter's leg?
Mostly pulling Twitter's leg. We did dig an escape tunnel.
Oh, okay.
One place that we lived. I want to live in an underground house. I think that's
Oh,
probably.
there we go. Well, tell me about that. Let's get off this crazy QAnon.
The first book I ever read as a child was The Hobbit.
Oh, okay.
And I went from Bob's books directly to that because I struggled with learning to read. It took me multiple days to get through the first line.
Oh my God. Are
And
you
that was the
dyslexic?
first real book that I ever read. And I just have a severe emotional attachment to The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings and all the J.R.R. Tolkien stuff.
I like The Hobbit. Are you dyslexic?
No, I
Oh.
don't know what was going on, but I struggled really badly with learn to read books.
Ah.
Just tears and frustration at Bob's books and everything else. But then once it clicked for me, it was like second nature. Like in a couple of weeks, I learned to read basically from Matt Satcat to reading the actual Lord of the Rings books after
Whoa.
finishing The Hobbit.
But that
So I was
was
ready to make the jump, but I just couldn't get it for some reason. So
okay. Do you know
even
the guy? Do
now,
you know who? What Weaver? What is his name? He played Festus. On the longest running cowboy show in the history of the world, Matt Dillon, the Matt Dillon Cowboy Show.
I am
And
completely
anyway,
unaware of the Matt Dillon Cowboy Show.
he was a TV star in the 60s, and he retired to Ridgeway, Colorado, which is in between Telluride and Grand Junction. You ever been through that part, Colorado?
Um,
Anyway,
Maybe passing through on my way to a fire, but I don't recall it.
he built he called them earth ships. He started a company and he started making these underground homes, and he lived in one and it was beautiful. I was inside it, and he combined dirt and bottles, like glass beer bottles into these things, and the light came through the bottles,
Yeah, there
and
are some houses in
they
this
were
area that
great.
are earth construction houses. I did structure protection on one that was basically an artificial hill that included like a garage made out of a storage container. That was
And then they throw the dirt over the top of it, or
I think most of the house was like you were describing, either earth bag
uh-huh,
construction
uh-huh.
or made of recycled materials and just tamped dirt berms with some sheet metal roofing over parts of it. It was essentially an artificial hill, and only the garage, like workshop portion at the bottom,
Oh, okay,
was a
okay.
storage container. My grand plan is to just have multiple converted storage containers, like in a wheel shape,
Now, Dakota,
buried
I
in the
don't
ground.
see that for you. You would thrive in a urban, sophisticated. I see you in Brooklyn or someplace, or Munich, or I'm serious. You just think
I
how much
have
fun you're having in
very
the middle of nowhere. Just think if you could interact like face to face with people as smart and articulate and interesting as you, as opposed to going to the construction and talking to QAnon heads all day long and tearing your.
mostly I just don't talk to the QAnon people. I've mostly stopped associating with any of the people. Even when I had friends that were vulnerable to conspiracy theory, they got sucked into it. I realized that arguing was completely pointless, and I just had to wait
Uh-huh.
for them to realize it was dumb on their own and just let it be. I've actually run into a lot of really progressive-minded people in construction and manual labor and a bunch and like outdoor and trade fields in rural Montana, and it's just they're a bit more low key about it because if you're too outspoken about it, people will try to argue with you about vaccines in the parking lot of the gas station. And
You know
like I
what the
don't
great
have
thing about
time.
Nebraska is? People are way too polite to talk about politics. I mean, I know I'm
It's
surrounded by
it's
what?
aggressive. Everyone's trying to evangelize to you, and they're convinced that they're right.
I don't know. I haven't had any trouble yet. And let me show you my hat. I'll come back with my hat.
Took an opportunity to just run away and grab coffee. No Trump. I like the.
It's a bridge hat. It's literally from a company that sells bridge gear.
I like the mock-up of the MAGA hats that just say "Made you look Black Lives Matter" in the same font.
Oh, that's pretty good. That's pretty good. No, this was not a political hat. These have been available for 20 years. This is, it's a bid is a no Trump if you know anything about bridge. But anyway, I don't get any flack from this
bridge. I don't get the reference.
Oh well, it's you bid and the highest bid is no Trump. It's kind of a trick. But anyway, nobody.
Very small Black Lives Matter protest on the town green in Eureka for a while. I missed that one, but one of my old coworkers was out there just standing on the green holding up signs in solidarity during one of the days of like nationwide small protests. I was at the Kalispell protest, which was at the time reported on national news as the largest protest with counter protesters that didn't turn into a street brawl.
Those were everywhere. Where Lauren Boebert is from Rifle, Colorado, which is just 60 miles east of Grand Junction on I-70, and I dated her art teacher, her high school art teacher.
I was waiting for you to finish that sentence in a way that wasn't.
No, I didn't date Lauren Boebert. I think that I couldn't have. But I mean, I watched the rise of Lauren Boebert, and because she was my congressman, she was Colorado 03 in Grand Junction, and she lost her home county, Garfield, because they knew her there, and they knew she was a fraud. Yeah, I like just a quick aside, the hypocrisy and how Lauren Boebert is treated versus someone like AOC, because like the weird like sexualized fixation on Ocasio-Cortez versus like Lauren Boebert's entire political ad campaign was like 50% like cowgirl country sex appeal. Oh yeah.
It looked like they were all shot like Hooters ads.
Shooters is her restaurant. Shooters, she was a play on Hooters.
Yep. Yeah. No, it was
redneck Hooters.
It was the blue jeans open carry ad, and it was all like all the material was ass shots. All of her campaign materials were ass shots. That was it. Half of her campaign was I'm a hotter Sarah Palin and I'm fucking crazy. Vote for me. And it worked. And now they're all weirdly fixated on AOC because they should love her because she's a regular person in
AOC
Congress. Like these, like, it should be like they should be looking at her like, I know I disagree with a lot of what she says, but she is anti big government and like really more comparable to a Jimmy Stewart character than most congressmen. But all these people that should be grudgingly supporting her across the aisle.
How can you know you're referencing Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, but you don't know who Matt Dillon is?
I'm referencing Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, but I don't know who Matt Dillon is. Yes.
There's a gap in your whatever.
My knowledge is incredibly eclectic. It's also is that how you pronounce that?
What?
Eclectic?
Eclectic, yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Because I never talked to anyone when I was a child. I didn't talk to people until I was in my mid-teens, and then
did you have a TV? Did you have a TV when you were growing up?
Yeah.
Do you know who Andy Griffith of May? Did you get my Andy Griffith of Mayberry reference?
Yeah, so I got the Andy Griffith show.
Do you know who Otis is?
That's because we
had. Do you know who Otis is?
Know who what?
Otis. He was the town drunk, the lovable town drunk. Back when alcoholism was funny, right?
Back when alcoholism was funny, you were supposed to beat your kids, and it was hilarious.
They changed that.
What's that?
Never mind. Yeah, I know you were supposed to beat your. Oh, just watching old Seinfelds. I mean, I watched one yesterday. Have you seen the one where George is interviewing? He's actually got a job working for the Yankees, and they tell him he can hire a secretary. And he's like,
I actually don't think I've seen that one. I've seen almost the complete series of Seinfeld.
oh, this is really good. So, so he's talking to Jerry before, and he says, but I'm not going to blow it. He says, I'm not going to hire a hot secretary. I'm not going to hire a tomato. He calls her a tomato, which is a, euphemism for a attractive woman, right? And so anyway, they show the first interview, and it's just a gorgeous woman, but she's talking about her spreadsheet skills, and you can tell she's extremely well qualified. And he's saying, you are incredibly well qualified, but you're so attractive, I don't even know what you're talking about, so I can't hire you. And he just like sends her out. And then another one comes in, and she's even more beautiful, right? And she's qualified too. And he tells her the same thing. He says, all I can think about is sleeping with you, so I have to say no. And then, of course, this buttoned up, nerdy looking woman with glasses comes in, right? And she's qualified, but completely unattractive, right? So she gets the job, and they're working together for a few days, and she really is good. She's found out ways, to save money on the oil that they heat up the popcorn with. It's going to save the Yankees organization millions and stuff like that. So
does Kramer try to bottle it all in a balloon for resale?
No. But get this. So something happens where this nerdiness does, like, it's actually turning George on. The fact that she's so nerdy is like this new kind of turn on and unattractive. It's this wild thing. And he looks at her and he goes, are you thinking what I'm thinking? And she says, yes. And they both rip their clothes off and have sex in his office.
Yeah, that's a different time in television.
I mean, it's just amazing how Me Too changed everything. Like almost.
Yeah, not just like circling way back to Bill Clinton, the entire Monica Lewinsky situation would play vastly differently on the news today than it did at the time, especially that that came to light as a result of a lawsuit over separate rape allegations.
Yeah, well,
that would have been
it actually came out of the Watergate investigation, which was an investigation about a land deal in Arkansas that turned out to be just like the emails, nothing to it. Right? Yep. They bought some land and they sold some land.
That one is a little bit debatable to me still, that technically there is a crime, which is the presence of technically classified information on a private server, even if it was well secured. The people who went to prison for it were generally...
She worked from home. That's what she did. She had to get her email. She went to Colin Powell and said, listen, I can't be in the office. That's just the way it is. Since there were computers that, you have to do work stuff at home. And she knew this was classified. So what do? You talk to the guy who had the job before you and said, how did you do this? You got work emails at home, classified work emails at home. What was your setup? He told her. She set up the exact same thing that he said. I mean, this is literally a non-story. And the story died on November 9th.
Yeah.
The news didn't care about it. Yeah, literally the next day. It's just like in 2018. Remember the caravans in 2018?
I wasn't even aware of the caravans by 2018. It was my love affair with Donald J. Trump was passionate but very brief. By 2018, I was becoming completely burnt out on Trump because...
Well, this was a midterm. It wasn't, it was, but the email story of 2018 was the caravans of M19s. There's thousands of them. They have tattoos. They have machetes. They're going to cut your head off. and they're at the border and they're ready to come across. And then literally the day after the election, it just vaporized. And the fact that that mainstream media, it wasn't, conspiracy theories.
Yeah,
The mainstream media was pushing this garbage, just like they pushed the email.
Fox News helped create the moon landing.
It wasn't just Fox News. Listen, I watched MSNBC leading up to the Trump-Clinton election, all right? And Morning Joe was droning on about the Clinton Foundation and Hillary's emails constantly. And his liberal wife. The Clinton Foundation. Okay, what is the Clinton Foundation? It's like there's nothing to it. They give money away to AIDS. They take money in. Their administration costs are like below average. I mean, as a 501c3, I was part of a fraudulent 501c3. I know about fraudulent 501c3s and how they work. The Clinton Foundation there was nothing there. And then on the other side, we have the Trumps that are literally running an illegal foundation, a total scam.
It's a literal massive criminal enterprise. Yeah, I'm well aware. The thing I was saying is that
the first thing he did when he came in office, he had to pay a $25 million fine for running Trump University, which was, do you remember that?
Oh, I almost forgot Trump University existed. But yeah, so they did.
He duped these idiots that, you can get rich in real estate just like billionaire Donald Trump. And, come and Donald's going to teach you all these things, and he's going to come and show up just like
scam he's been running since he published Art of the Deal.
Exactly. And do you know the Trump family was actually involved in a real, classic pyramid, the stupid things.
I don't doubt it. I think they're probably their whole thing is basic petty scams. And that's like where people refuse to believe that Donald Trump is corrupt because why wouldn't he be making a bunch more money? Why wouldn't he have much higher net worth?
Because he's an idiot.
It's because his family operates at the thought level for their crimes. Like his father was much more sophisticated, but they're generally.
His father was a fantastic businessman.
He was at the level of petty street thugs. They operate at the level of everybody has that one rich relative.
But they're not even good at it.
And always trying to get free meals at restaurants or steals gifts at a wedding. Even though they're theoretically a millionaire, they're always grifting and always trying to steal the tip money you leave behind when you all go out to dinner. That's the Trump family. That's what a bunch of people don't realize. They assume that they must be smart, but the level they're operating at is double charging the Secret Service for use of golf carts.
Yeah, I know. Just pathetic stuff like that. But their dad went from nothing,
stupid scams,
from doing what you're doing. Their dad started out building spec homes, one at a time, and just built that and eventually owned these boring apartments in outer New York, middle class, lower middle class. But guess what? Thousands and thousands and thousands of rental units. I mean, just think the business and the entire business was opening envelopes and taking the checks out and depositing the checks. It was like your dad could have done, right?
Yep. If it were run well.
I know, but your dad didn't even have to provide a place to live. Right? I mean, your dad had an even better thing going on. Literally that's what he inherited.
Literally selling an idea. Yes.
Not only did he inherit, in today's money, $500 million. Okay. He inherited a business that was just an absolute cash cow. If he had done absolutely nothing, he would be, on the huge billionaire level he pretends to be.
But he had to be a baller.
Yes. Exactly.
He had to be the guy who runs casinos.
He had to go from Queens to Manhattan. He had to be the casino mogul. He had this pathetic image.
He had to run Atlantic City. He had to run Atlanta. He had to have an airline. He had to have custom steaks. He had
I'm in Omaha, right? He tried to copy Omaha steaks, but guess what? Omaha steaks are actually good quality steaks. His steaks were horrible. They were just junk. They were the lowest grade of beef, which is,
And when they rebranded them during the election and sold them basically as merchandise, they would outsource through local butchers. So that basically the Trump steaks thing was literally just the wrapping paper.
Yeah, well, that's like most of his deals are just licensing deals. But we can get in anyway. What else did I say? So you're close to your siblings. How many of them live there with you now? Still, they're
all but my eldest sister. So 4.
And what did she go off and do? Where is she?
She's living her own life in the Flathead area. Got a job in an apartment and all that.
And what about your dad and you, as far as when, closeness? Does he send you a Christmas card or text you every once in a while?
He would really like someday to be able to make a heartfelt reconciliation and heal this father-son divide. And
what did he say?
If he dropped from a heart attack in the street, I might move a trash can to conceal him from view so that bystanders would be less likely to see him and provide CPR.
Where do you think he is?
I believe he's in Texas, poised near the border, ready to make a run for the Mexican border if indictments.
Gonna make a taco run for
basically in hiding.
Hey, don't you think he's cooperating?
I think.
Why is his name doesn't come up in any of this stuff? I mean, I get, he was subpoenaed. Your mom knows this. He was subpoenaed by one of the lower oath keepers, right? Or somebody has subpoenaed him to. They've subpoenaed. I think they subpoenaed. This is one of the 1/6 defendants has subpoenaed your dad.
As a witness for the defense, yes.
Yeah, exactly.
But he's also been subpoenaed by the commission.
Did he show up, or what's going on with that? How come you don't hear about that in the news? Is he defying it, or?
I think they just can't find him.
You can't serve him.
Yeah.
The old trick where you can't.
Yeah, no, he's really good at that. Getting papers to him is an incredible hassle because he basically he's very well adapted to the nearly homeless couch surfing life. And
he's got 30,000 couches to choose from.
Yeah, no,
right? Can you imagine? It's the
network of people that he can grift from to remain in hiding and circulate through private homes.
Hey, if the FBI wanted him, they could find him.
Here's the thing, and here's my personal conspiracy theory to do with Oath Keepers, is sometimes people like Stewart Rhodes arise organically. I think Stewart happened organically just because he, well, for one thing, was taking advantage of my mom's work ethic. Without her, it wouldn't have been possible, but somebody else absolutely would have filled the void. There would have been somebody else probably with less strong branding, but it might have been, in the end, it might have been more dangerous if a more competent, harder working person had started an Oath Keepers-like organization and gone after it with real ambition. If he'd gone after it with real ambition and drive and put in any amount of, I have not yet. Okay, let's put this into context here. We used to be the poorest county up here in Lincoln, used to be the poorest county in the state of Montana. I think we're second now. We are poorer per capita than some of the most badly screwed over Indian reservations in the country.
Oh my God.
And really we're only second poorest because of maybe third now because of the number of wealthy people who buy expensive homes here and drive up the property costs and cost of living by making it a half-functioning resort community.
I have a story like that. Let me do a tangent. While my son was pretending to go to college in Bozeman, he was actually a ski bum. No, we found out he showed up at my apartment. I was going through a divorce, so that wasn't it was a house in Grand Junction, and he calls me, and he's an hour out, and he goes, "Dad, can I stay there?" I go, "What do you mean? You're in college. You're a junior in college." And he goes, "Well, technically, I'm still a freshman," and and they did the thing where where you can't see their grades because they're 18 and they have to give you permission for the parents to see your grades. So he never signed that. And you know, I was going through the divorce and I said, you know, are we really going to let him get away with not letting him see the grades? And anyway, whatever. But what he was actually doing is working up at the ski resorts. And so he was in the rental place and David Letterman walks in with his entourage. And okay, I don't know are you a skier?
No, I haven't been skiing since I was a little kid.
Okay. Well, like, you know, low level and not wealthy people rent their skis, you know, and they have to ski on the cheap rentals. And, you know, middle class, the typical skier, you know, has their own gear, right? But guess what? Like really wealthy people, they don't want the hassle of lugging around ski equipment, which is a big pain in the neck.
Yeah, so they always rent.
They rent, but the really good stuff. You know, they don't rent the rental stuff. They go into the ski shop and they can rent whatever. So he goes in and he's renting with everybody, you know, for himself and the entourage, and he gave every single person $100 bill that worked in the shop, including my son, David Letterman. Yep. And every time he got on the lift, he gave the lift operator a $100 bill. So that's my David Letterman, Montana skiing story and rental. Sorry to interrupt there.
No, that's fine. My mom has a lot of weird celebrity encounter stories from Las Vegas.
Oh, I bet.
I'll let her tell those on a future episode. But
yeah, well,
so screwed up and poor as we are, riddled with meth and cocaine and multi-generational alcoholism and
now the cocaine and meth has fentanyl in it.
Oh, it's really bad. But like as bad as things are, and like I've been around some like just want to say like not to pass judgment. I've met a lot of really amazing, decent, intelligent, good-hearted, working class people, like even way back in the hills, like people you would stereotype as hillbillies that are great. I've met some awful, awful white trash. I have yet to encounter a single person lazier than Stewart Rhodes. And I might not encounter a single person lazier than Stewart Rhodes for the rest of my life.
So maybe that's what happened to the money. He was just too disorganized and lazy to get it into the bank.
Maybe worked. I want to say unless you count.
How do you get a law degree? That you have to study. You have to work hard to get a law degree.
He barely squeaked by in a lot of things and relied on my mom to like help him with the schoolwork. But he could put in tremendous bursts of short-term effort into something, but with no hard deadlines hanging over him in the environment that Oath Keepers created. I want to say sometimes he would work 20 hours a month.
Wow. What do you do the rest of the time?
Lounge in his bed with his laptop, with 50 tabs of porn and rifle forums open, surrounded by hoarded survival equipment and trash. Like a mix between Jabba the Hutt and a squirrel burrowing into a nest for the winter.
Whoa. Wow. Okay, let's get back to some of my...
That was the impulsive buying of stuff with Oath Keepers funds that all ended up in the same hoard. That was all Oath Keepers owned equipment. That ended
up. Did he ever buy anything cool, like besides guns? I mean, did you have a nice TV
night vision scopes, satellite phones, long range scopes, body armor, 72 materials for making 72-hour kits, medical equipment.
What's this 72-hour kit?
That's your bag. That's got changes of clothes and food and a basic medical kit,
or
and
when you're like on the
fresh
run,
water.
survival gear type stuff.
Yep, you grab that bag if you were getting bombed or if you're in an earthquake.
And then you go out the tunnel. You grab the
And then you
bag,
go out
go
the
out
tunnel.
the escape tunnel.
The CDC, not the CDC, the FEMA recommends actually having a 72-hour kit. I think it's something that everyone should have. It's not regular to have 8 or 9.
I have a deli around the corner. It's like 72-hour kit.
72 hours worth of freeze-dried food and either a lot of fresh bags of fresh water packed up in the pack, or depending on your environment, filters and filtration equipment, or sterilizing chlorine tablets for making like outside sources of water potable. And
did he actually ever do that? Did you guys go camping when you were kids?
Oh yeah, we'd have miserable survival adventures sporadically. That would be just absolute survivalist drudgery, but never regularly enough that I absorbed actually any good, useful skills. I managed to learn a modicum of wilderness survival and general emergency stuff.
Okay.
But nowhere near what I should have come away with in exchange for the childhood that I had.
Okay.
I actually am legitimately mad about that still, that I did not emerge from my childhood as like who's the author of the Born Supremacy books?
I know who you're talking about. Tom Clancy? No.
Oh no, it's never mind. But yeah, I should have emerged from my childhood and like burst out of my cocoon as a fully realized badass from like a techno thriller, and I did not. I was basically halfway like basement neckbeard neat, like the kind of person that owns 40 anime body pillows.
Yeah, but which brings me to another question. You don't sound like you're from rural Montana.
No, we bounced around. I was born in Las Vegas. We bounced everywhere, but nowhere that we lived, like Virginia, Mesa, Arizona, Hollywood, Florida, Las Vegas, multiple towns in Montana.
Wait, I didn't know about Florida. How'd you end up
a summer internship in Florida while Stewart was going to Yale?
An internship with who?
I can't.
Politician?
Recall. It's some kind of. I actually don't know. I was a very little kid then. I mostly remember going to the beach a lot because the beach was free and we were very poor.
So when you packed up, what did you throw everything in the station wagon that you owned, or do you have moving trucks?
Moving trucks. We always had huge piles of crap, boxes and boxes of books. We were always at stuffed capacity for whatever structure we were living in.
So he's a bit of a hoarder?
He's an extreme hoarder. He's an extreme hoarder, which is part of the equation for all the missing money. Is that not only would he hoard, he would hoard wherever he happened to be, including staying on somebody's couch for an Oath Keepers operation in a far-flung state. He would reconstruct his survival equipment hoard wherever he happened to be, and we would get phone calls and like emails from people trying to get Oath Keepers to take the stuff back and get it out of their house.
That he'd left?
He would ignore them.
So he had it delivered? Or how?
Yeah, he would just order. He would buy stuff from swap meets and military surplus stores and gun stores and order online. And if you were staying somewhere for an extended period of time, like all the times that Oath Keepers did a quote unquote disaster relief after the series of hurricanes.
Right. Yeah, that was like PR.
Some of those guys did actual work, which is strange because you never saw any of it. I think it's because Stewart was never involved with any of the actual work, like clearing trees out of people's driveways so they could get in and out. Is like none of that footage of like them doing actual disaster aid ever made it to the public, even though he was making a big fuss about it.
Right. Well, that's what you want to do. It's all about the image.
Yeah, and he was just strange because there was just they sometimes did stuff, even though I think a lot of it was Stewart going on a narcissistic supply field trip and just being awash in the adoration of all of his little followers for weeks on end, going on a paramilitary adventure and giving orders to people who would have been higher ranked than him when he was actually in the military and receiving the respect of like actual combat veterans and accomplishing a mission. All of it fed directly into his ego. He would build up a huge hoard of stuff, collect a ton of donation money, come home.
Okay.
So that's a big part of your missing equation there.
Hang on.
Is the expense of these
do you
operations.
think he got radicalized in the military?
No. He was always going to be like this. It was just a matter of what thing he would graft onto. Somewhere in our house is a multi-page handwritten declaration from him when he was 15 years old, swearing his eternal allegiance to America, swearing like a blood oath of family warrior honor, and to always oppose white supremacists and racist groups and stand up for our Constitution and perfect myself as a man. And it's really weird. It reads like...
But your grandma didn't care about any of that stuff.
No,
right?
he just like...
Where did he pick it up?
He's always been exactly the same. Like, I was shocked when I read it because it sounds exactly like a bunch of his speeches later on when he was
wow,
making basically his entire
I've never
career
had the stomach to actually listen to one of his speeches, or but is he an effective speaker?
He had a traveling preacher's magnetism.
Okay.
It was basically his entire career in Oath Keepers was grifting off of people.
See, I mean, that's what I'm saying. He's the next generation Dusty Buckle. You know, he's just...
He very much is. He's very much a reflection of the charismatic cult leaders that recruited from the wreckage of the 1960s.
But here's my other thing that I want to bounce off. You kind of think, okay, so I always thought, that the preachers, I don't think don't really believe in God. But then, does he believe his own bullshit?
He believes his own bullshit to a great extent, but he's willing to compromise. He's willing to compromise his ideals at the flick of a switch if he stands to gain personally.
Oh, is he an anti-vaxxer?
I think
is he vaccinated? Do you think he's vaccinated?
Anti-vaxxer.
Do you think he's vaccinated? Oh, that would be he'd probably be afraid of not of the vaccine, but of the tracking, because you can't get the vaccine without them knowing who you are.
The Bill Gates microchip.
No. The real tracking, you're vaccinated.
Oh, yes, going in for the appointment.
You can't just...
I was going to say...
You can't just go in and say, give me a shot.
The reason I think he is not vaccinated is not because he doesn't believe in it. He was 100% wrapped up in believing that coronavirus was going to end the world. It was going to be a serious threat and was going to be on the scale of the 1918 flu epidemic. And texted me about it nonstop when coronavirus was at its height.
Did he want you to get vaccinated? Did he tell you to go?
This was before the vaccines.
Or to be safe?
He wanted to make sure that I was completely isolated because he was terrified.
Yeah, I did that with my kids too. I mean, I was afraid that they weren't taking enough precautions before there was a vaccine.
Yeah, so he came out publicly in full support of lockdown and quarantine mandates.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Demanded stricter coronavirus measures, and then the backlash. Yeah,
but then that was the beginning of this, where there were, the freedom movement, raiding the capitals. The practice run for 1/6 was in Michigan. Weren't those like freedom? Trump rallied them up. Freedom in when they went and raided the Capitol in Michigan. Those were anti-maskers, anti-lockdowners.
Yep. Well, that's the conspiracy narrative that's popular in Eureka at the moment, is that the 1/6 crowd were also all anti-lockdown and not there because they wanted Trump to be their king forever. But that's completely false.
What about the flags that all said Trump? I mean,
yeah, no, there's a million flags with Trump photoshopped onto Rambo's body all over this town.
Oh God! You mean that? I've seen that one with the
Yeah,
machine
you can
gun
see
and
in the
the.
video in the
I mean, that's a
supercut.
joke.
In
That
the
is. I mean,
supercut of the riot, you can see a bunch of people beating cops with those flags. Yeah, they're all over this town. But
I mean, have you ever seen Trump naked? I mean,
I would be
what?
dead.
I know.
Oh, I mean, we got a really, again, Dennis, or is it Denise Villeneuve gave us a really good approximation of what that would look like in Dune just recently.
Oh, yeah, I've seen
I
that
don't
guy.
think Trump has anti-gravity yet, but that
E-
could be in the next
Even in
round.
the original Dune, that thing in the original Dune. Did you watch? Have you seen? Oh, yeah, have you seen the original one?
Oh
Right?
yeah, and I saw the
That
1984.
that
I still dearly love the 84 version, even though I'm
yeah,
usually a
it's
purist
good.
on things like that, just
Uh-huh.
because it is so strange. It's so very David Lynch, and it gets the feel of the book across a lot better than like the Sci-Fi Channel series, which is basically the best school play ever filmed. But
Yeah.
amazing hats,
Hey,
amazing hats in the Sci-Fi Channel miniseries of Dune. If you ever watched that,
I'm not a sci-fi fan, but man, there was a series a couple years ago by the guys that started The Office. It was called People of Earth. Have you seen it?
oh, I dearly love People of Earth.
That
I
is my
love that
favorite.
show.
I just discovered it on Hulu. It is, and why is it got canceled? It
Yeah, it got
screams, it's
canceled.
unresolved.
It was completely brilliant, and the character writing was so good.
Jeff. I mean, and the Jeff is the, what do they call him? The little green man or whatever. He's a gray, and then the guy from the Scandinavian guy, the tall blonde guy. I mean, he's
Yeah, the
he's
interplay of everybody's characters was
is so
amazing,
fantastic.
and it's tragic that they canceled it, and I don't know why they would have done that.
And the guy that keeps getting getting hit by a car. I mean, and Eric the
Okay,
Cube,
we're gonna end
is
up
the
talking about
perfect
television
asshole
for like two
boss.
hours if we don't dial this back.
I know. Okay. Well, we can wrap it up. So, I was going to ask you this. Did was your father abusive?
Oh yes, extremely.
Really?
Yes. Less
I don't.
physically.
What place does he operate in where you can like not file your taxes, when you can, not run your business right, when you can like abuse your children and not get in any trouble?
There are a lot of people that just skirt by in the world. There are a lot of shady business people in
I've been
in
playing by
this
the
little
rules my
county.
whole life, and I'm finding out I didn't have to, and I'm really mad about it.
Yeah, no, it's extremely frustrating to realize that you could have just ignored the rules as long as you weren't an idiot and gotten away with
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
Yeah,
And do you think he got any um, coronavirus relief money? Is he one of those guys that was
I
smart
think
enough to?
I think there a publicly available database of PPP loans?
Yeah, that's what I was asking about. I mean, do you know
I
who I
don't
know who
think
got
so.
one? My best friend is related to. You probably don't know about Hot Point. Hot Point used to be a big, like Frigidaire. It was a huge appliance
Yeah,
brand. There
no,
were Hot
I'm
Point
unaware of Hot
stoves.
Point.
There were Hot Point refrigerators. It was a big brand when I was a kid, and anyway, the name got sold, and the company got sold, and now Hot Point, it doesn't exist. But the Hot Point heirs got 1.75 million in PPP loans, and it's a
I think a
holding
bunch of those got
for a
completely forgiven.
holding company. It's a
Yep.
holding company.
A bunch of franchise operations of large businesses got PPP loans when they should not have been able to qualify.
But at least they had employees. They don't even have employees. They don't have a building. They don't have anything. They just had a really good lawyer that filled out some forms and got them 1.75 million.
I think a lot more theft happened with the PPP
They're
loans than
estimating
anything else in it.
250 billion in fraud because
Yeah.
there was no checking. They had to get it out right away. And it's the first thing that the Democrats came up with that the Republicans said, "Oh yeah, let's do that. Let's do that. That's a
Oh
fantastic
yeah,
idea."
everyone likes to forget. Everyone likes to ramble on about the super unemployment ruining the job market, which that's inaccurate for a huge number of reasons that we don't have time for you or I to rant about. But the main thing is, like, they all forget that Trump signed off on that first program.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And it's
yeah,
because him and his stood to benefit from it in the short term.
Yeah, right. So do you have any, did you go to college?
I have attended so far one semester of community college, and the next one is starting in 9 days.
Oh, man.
And before that, I just got my GED, and I went to EMT training through a local college.
Why didn't you follow up on that?
I discovered that I deeply hate medical, but also I was under pressure to become a working EMT just so I could be the family combat medic for the apocalypse. This is when I was 15, 16.
Oh my God.
Still fully wrapped up around with Stewart.
Okay. All right.
Well, and I just was basically strong-armed into doing it and barely passed. And this, well, not, I got an A-, but to me, it felt like the end of the world. And discovered that I hated medical. It stresses me out. Medical stresses me out like nothing else in the world. And I was so socially awkward because I had barely any idea how to talk to people outside of highly specific circumstances that I think I am probably one of the most uncomfortable, strange students that ever passed through the EMT course and ride-along program in our neighboring county.
Well, what would you want to do? What would be your ideal job, or how would you like to spend the rest of your life?
I want to write trashy sci-fi adventure novels and eventually publish a doorstopper fantasy novel the size of a phone book that no one will read.
Oh, that's a great. Have you started?
A little bit, yes.
Your mom can write.
I lost a lot of my old drafts in a computer with a hard drive that died. So I wasn't smart enough to have backups, but yeah, I have. And aside from that, I would like to.
This never dies.
I would like to invent a better bee waterer. I have a very specific idea for making.
You're not going to believe. I saw on public television this morning this woman that is making bee hotels that water bees. It's like a box with a bunch of holes in it, but she grows them from fungus. And there's a whole and you can make anything out of fungus. She made a canoe out of fungus, and it's almost like nanotechnology, but they're actually using fungus to build things.
Just grow it into a mold, and you can train fungus to break down and eat plastic waste. You can,
and then you put it out in the sun, and it kills the fungus, and it's structurally sound and light and strong. It's a material. It's a building material.
Edible fungus crop from growing it on a pile of plastic water bottles. Once you get it properly shifted over to consuming plastic waste.
That's great. That's great. I think you should get a real degree. If your dad can get, through Yale law, you should be able to get a freaking
I can
scholarship. Come on, start applying. I mean, life is. I mean, the college was the best 4 years of my life, and I majored in anthropology and physics, and both worthless, unless, especially anthropology. The only thing anthropology qualifies you for is, anthropology grad school, and then eventually teaching anthropology, which is not much of a career path. But it was fascinating. And, it's just, now people treat college more as, job training kind of thing. But I think you would go into it with the right attitude of, this is, just like the way the ancient Greeks had, education just for education's sake. And you have 4 years just to let your mind go anywhere. I think I think you're college material, young man, is what I'm saying.
We'll see about that. And I've kept straight A's so far. Let's see if I can maintain it.
There you go. All right. Well, I'll talk to Adam and put together some focused questions. I'm now, you were serious about the tangent thing, and I'm a tangent guy. The two of we need Adam to rein us in. otherwise.
Every good podcast I listen to has a guy who keeps the conversation on track, and that's his job.
That's what he does. That's what he does. Okay.
Yeah, some things I would like to focus on is I have a lot of weird little is it vignettes? Is that the pronunciation?
Vignette.
About life with Stewart that sheds a lot of light on who he is personally. I think that would, once you start to get a picture of how Stewart exists, I think it will help answer a lot of your questions about where all the Oath Keepers' income went, because I've never encountered anyone as wasteful in the strangest ways as Stewart. He is the most.
So he's left a trail of survival gear across the country.
It's like, literally a trail of abandoned survival gear, and that's just the beginning of it that came up.
Does he have any cool watches? I mean, those are easy to. I'm a watch guy. Look at this. Survival gears are into like tritium dials, and
I want to say yes, there were a lot of cool watches, but I can't give you specific.
Damn, you gotta snag the watches. You should have snagged the watches. Those. And the thing about watches is, you can put them in your pocket. It's not like, grabbing the AK-47s. You can just snag those watches, and some of them are really cool. Deep Blue makes a great. My only contact with the Survivalist thing is that those guys are into watches. The G-Shocks and stuff like that. But
a G-Shock sounds very familiar. I'm willing to bet that there was a G-Shock on his personal ensemble.
Oh, I bet he had a Mudmaster, a G-Shock Mudmaster. That's what the Survivalists are into.
Somewhere in his piles of baseball caps with pockets of lead shots so you can hit people with them, and his 17 knives that he carried on his person, including the one inside his belt buckle in case someone attacked him standing at a urinal and he needed to quick draw, and his concealed batons.
Wait. He was. Why did he think someone would attack him at a urinal? I know a lot of guys like
paranoia.
Don't want you looking over there.
Extreme paranoia. He thought he was going to be assassinated and ambushed.
And that's like a vulnerable time when you're at the urinal.
And it's like specifically at a truck stop urinal. He used to have me get out of the car.
Okay, now this is getting good. Now we're getting into good stuff right at the end. Oh, we got to talk. You got to bring up this story. You got to bring during the real thing. Okay, the urinal. Okay, tell me this story.
So just showing me all his millions of knives, and then he had this one. It was so small. It was like almost like the size of like the old, the military surplus can openers. If you ever seen those, this very tiny knife.
One you could get on a plane, maybe. Knife. Well, you can do some damage with a, box cutters took the towers down.
But this is a very short blade. It was a very, very small knife. Concealed entirely within a belt buckle.
Oh, wow.
So, in addition to having a knife on either side, in his pockets, on his belt, in his multi-tool, a knife concealed under the rim of his hat, I believe boot knives as well, and then the belt buckle knife.
Is your mom still there?
Could quickly transition from the position of holding yourself at a urinal to quick drawing the knife and spinning on the attack to fend off someone attempting to abduct him in a truck stop bathroom.
He had a specialized truck stop urinal knife. Did he rehearse these moves? It's like, yes, did he zip up first?
Cut himself rehearsing his moves, actually.
I think he's compensating. There's a lot of stuff going on there.
There's a lot of very strange psychological quirks that hint at weird stuff. But yeah, there's 1,000,001 little Stewart vignettes, and I believe I have a personal conspiracy theory about Stewart's relationship with the FBI.
Oh, well, let's hear that.
Donald Trump.
Or do you want to save it for the podcast?
Theory is that after Bundy Ranch, he was compromised and became a confidential informant. And I believe that he clung as hard onto Trump as he did in the hopes that if Trump stayed in power, he would be able to get out from underneath the thumb of the FBI. Because going back to the 2016 election, he's been terrified of a Democrat becoming president because he thought that would create extra political breathing room for the FBI to go back and prosecute him for his actions in Bundy Ranch, like supplying
Okay, if
logistics and
he's
communications.
afraid of going to jail and stuff like, what do you think he did you think he played any real role in 1/6?
I think he was in communication with people through intermediaries.
He's too smart to have been.
He's always very smart about skirting gray areas. That is one lesson.
Well, no, I mean like cell phones and stuff like that. You know how all the idiots got caught. You know.
Yes.
So easily.
His Signal app messages ended up out in the wild because somebody didn't delete their phones fast enough.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's the problem. There's always the guy on the other end.
Yeah, it's even with
you can be so careful. Yeah.
Even with kick-ass encryption, the people you're talking to have copies. Mm-hmm. That's still a security breach. But the narrative that I've been hearing, which is that which is borne out by his own statements, that they wanted Trump to invoke the Insurrection Act so they can go in and perform mass arrests on Congress and arrest the Antifa counter protesters that they thought were going to be there, and they were going to be the quick reaction force on hand for that. And if they have to create the chaos that causes the Insurrection Act to be invoked, then so be it. That sounds exactly like the kind of thing he would do. I personally heard him talking with another Oath Keeper about how really they need to develop a contingency plan for if it looks like the militia movement is going to lose in the long term, where if need be, instead of waiting for the New World Order to make the first move, they would fake the abduction by federal agents of prominent militia movement people and do a false flag black bagging of militia movement people to kick off the next American Revolution at the time and under the circumstances of their choosing, instead of being reactive to the Illuminati.
Oh my God.
So that's definitely that inherent that inherent thought process and that planning is in his head. So that sounds like the Insurrection Act and then QRF response theory is exactly what I think was really going on. It's all because he's just desperate to avoid going to federal prison.
Well, I bet some of those guys are rolling on him right now.
My personal theory is that his prosecution is going to be a trial run for nabbing people higher up the chain.
Higher up than he is? Who's higher than he is?
I would say people in Trump's circle, like Roger Stone.
Oh yeah, but Roger Stone was more of a Proud Boys guy, wasn't he?
Wasn't Roger Stone was one of Trump's top campaign people?
Oh yeah. Oh no, I know exactly who Roger Stone is, but he had the as personal bodyguards.
He had Oath Keepers members as his personal bodyguards.
Oh, did he? Okay.
Yes, he did. There is actually a picture of Stewart Rhodes, Roger Stone, and Michael Flynn striding around D.C.
Oh my God! On the 5th?
On the 5th.
Your dad was in D.C. on the 5th?
Yeah, he was in D.C. with Sidney Powell from Lawyers for Trump.
You know what? He should be afraid of federal prosecution.
Oh yeah, no, he was there. He was there on the Capitol grounds on the 6th. He just never entered the building. He was live chatting the breaching of the doors and everything to other Oath Keepers members inside their encrypted Signal chat that
my goodness. And it was the Oath Keepers that did that, whatever they call it, where you put their hand on the shoulder.
They made their way through
the That was the Oath Keepers, right?
That was Oath Keepers, yes.
Yeah, you know what?
There were Oath Keepers.
He should be getting his affairs in order.
Yeah, no, he's running very scared right now with good reason. But that was his support for that whole thing was a last-ditch attempt to make sure that he would avoid prosecution, and he just buried himself deeper.
You know what?
Now there's no
the
chance.
The fact they're not talking about him should scare the shit off of him. And that, I'm serious.
People think that he, way back in 2012, there was a conspiracy theory website. I wish I could find it again. I wish I could Wayback Machine, but I can't even remember what it was. Somebody swore up and down that Stewart Rhodes was a very particular Department of Homeland Security agent who had had plastic surgery and a fake ID created for him to go undercover in the militia movement as a honeypot. So there have been people calling him a secret agent 10 years now. But what I see in January 6th is I genuinely think that was a desperate attempt to get out from under the thumb of the FBI. And what would have happened is he would have ended up like this recent shootout in Belarus where the programmer who was part of an opposition party group was killed. Is Oath Keepers would have become the deniable asset paramilitary arm of the intelligence agencies under a junta mostly run by Michael Flynn. Maybe Trump would have disappeared from view or lost power, and Michael Flynn and his backers would have been in charge of the country, and Stewart would have been answering to him. Stewart would have been answering to Michael Flynn and Eric Prince. If you ever want to try to red pill a conservative on how shady the 6th was, bring up the involvement of Eric Prince, remind them that Eric Prince of Blackwater wanted to sell the Obama administration missile-armed spy blimps for crowd control in 2008.
Mm-hmm.
He's been a sketchy dude for a long time.
Oh, yeah.
Deeply tied in with Trump and willingly associating with the likes of Eric Prince is like Stewart hated Blackwater. He thought Blackwater was an arm of the New World Order, and now he's willingly getting into bed with the Blackwater guys' circle of friends.
Wild.
So it was the business plot 2.0. It's just we've been in this exact situation before. There was whoever the real people communicating through Roger Stone and Bannon were. And Flynn, those are the people that would have been in charge of the country eventually. And then we would never have gotten rid of them unless they all hanged.
This is wild. This is good stuff.
That's who he was trying to curry favor with, I think, through many intermediaries to create plausible deniability, and he's going to be hung out to dry, but he's also going to serve as a practice run for nailing Roger Stone and Bannon and Flynn, and maybe up from there, because his involvement was in the same ballpark as theirs, was working through subordinates and trying to maintain deniability. If they can get him using the same strategies that brought down mob bosses who maintain multiple layers of deniability,
mm-hmm.
then they'll be able to move up the chain. And if they can build an iron case against him, they'll be able to flip him and he'll turn informant. Right now, he thinks he has a chance. Probably the reason why he's still on the run is he thinks he has a chance of getting away scot-free.
Not truly escaping.
Truly escaping.
I mean, not like hiding out in a third world country, but actually...
Maybe. Hiding out in a third world country was a plan that came up very frequently over the course of my childhood. There were a couple times where I was handed books on learning Spanish in case we had to flee to Latin America.
Yeah, but it's 2022. You can't do anything. I mean, there's border control. There's electronic passports.
They haven't gotten the girls do porn guy. He's in Thailand somewhere. As long as you can get out of the country in the first place. And there are a lot of Oath Keepers members on Border Patrol. Joe Arpaio was his best friend, despite being basically a small-scale proto-fascist.
Who?
Sheriff Joe Arpaio.
Oh, the sheriff. Oh my God.
Joe Arpaio.
What a small. Of course, he knew him. I know all about it, and got pardoned by Trump.
Yep. For the guy who.
Why didn't Trump pardon Stewart?
Well, he hadn't been charged with anything, and he didn't give preemptive pardons to anyone, including Rudy Giuliani.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
His pardons reveal the people that he had actual mutual loyalty or at least mutually beneficial relationships with, is the Lawyers for Trump people and the people who breached the Capitol and
Kushner's dad.
People those were hung out to dry. The My Pillow guy. Oh God. They were all hung out to dry.
I mean, that guy's clinically insane.
Yeah, I feel actually really bad for him.
So do I. I mean, he's a sad character.
I've seen what long-term hard drug abuse does to people, and he was just made very vulnerable to falling under the spell of someone like Trump through abuse of crack cocaine.
Yeah, I was in rehab for booze after my divorce and my twin brother died. I self-medicated for about 6 months and ended up.
Give me a second to let the dog in. Alrighty.
Anyway, I spent 30 days in like a luxury rehab in Denver, and the drunks were like me, 40s and 50s years old guys, and then we had the housewives that were doing like Valium and wine, and then we had the meth heads and the crack heads, and the drunks sobered out after a few days, and then we had kids your age that were opioid addictions, and they got kind of normal too because they put them on that Suboxone, right? But the ones that never got normal were the meth heads and the crack heads.
Meth in particular will make you prone to paranoia for the rest of your life.
Yeah, it alters your brain. I mean, there's no two ways about it.
You can learn to recognize the very particular twitchy body language of someone who has a history with meth. Like just in the way they reach for their cell phone to answer it, you learn to recognize the body language.
Wow.
Sudden, furtive, jerky movement. And it's incredibly sad because I know some great people who had like early adulthood brushes with meth just because of where they grew up, and they have the deck stacked against them because they're just dealing with the lifelong after effects of being meth users when they were young.
You know what else is really horrible is benzos. You know what those are?
And not super huge in this county, but I know people who claim to have been benzo dealers to fund their meth habits.
Those were the absolute craziest people, man. Those guys were just, ugh. Anyway. All right. Well, you know what? Adam is really going to get thrilled about that what you were just doing before. I kind of wanted to make this more about you and like what it's like to be the son of somebody like that.
Yeah, I would like to go into a lot of that.
But if you want to talk about that, that's great. And I mean, that's what the public wants to see anyway. And man, you got some great stuff. You have some great information and good theories. I think it's going to be a terrific show.
Like a lot of stuff about Oath Keepers doesn't make any kind of sense. Only by looking at the individual deeply, deeply abnormal psychology of Stewart Rhodes does the state of Oath Keepers and how everything played out start to make a little bit of sense, because Stewart is simply operating on a very particular, very short-term, base-level survival logic, like that might be unique to him, or if not unique to him, familiar to people who have very narcissistic hoarder relatives.
Did he talk about his time in the military much?
Oh, all the time.
Really?
Constantly.
See, my dad was normal. My dad was a fighter pilot, and I didn't even know he was in the military till I was like 12 when I found some stuff.
The paratrooper thing is...
That's the way it used to be, People
it's his entire identity, basically.
Yeah, I know. That's what happens now. That's why I'm saying, what I asked about, do you think he got indoctrinated in the military? Because...
No, he was in probably at one of the most lax times possible. There's photos of him in his barracks with, like, living in a tiny proto-version of his horde nest, surrounded by just piles of untidy stuff.
Wait, that's in the military. I thought you had to like be able to bounce a quarter on your perfectly made bed, and everything has to be
maybe in basic training, but like that's not the photos I saw. That was probably the most relaxed time to be in the military.
Kind of like more like MASH.
Yeah,
did I lose you on that?
He lived MASH and spent a lot of time in base hospitals.
Oh wow. Okay. All right. Well, I'm hungry, and Got to turn the heat on. It's gone from. I have south-facing full glass windows, so I can keep the heat off during the day, and then when the sun goes down, the temperature drops about 20 degrees. So I've got to do my
that sounds a
survivalist
lot
thing.
like. Yeah, I've lived in houses like that. I lived in A-frame houses that held heat terribly, just because of the sheer size of the windows.
Yeah, well, but when the sun's coming through, it's wonderful.
Yep.
All right. Well, it was wonderful meeting you. We'll probably
you too. Thank you.
be doing this. Today is Sunday. Within the next couple days, if that's
I
good.
am free.
What time of day is good for you? So you're working construction. What time do you get home?
Usually after probably 4 o'clock Mountain Standard Time, which is an hour behind Central. So it's 5:20 p.m. for me right now.
Okay, yeah, you guys are in the middle because he's on the west coast of California. Okay, so 5:20.
And I have Tuesday and Wednesday off. So that's my weekend.
Okay, great. You work weekends. What kind of stuff are you building?
Oh, I'm doing sheetrock.
Oh, I can do sheetrock.
Yeah, there's tremendous. You should come to Montana. There's tremendous demand for sheetrock people. I can't get enough of them.
I'm actually good at it. I mean, I've only done it for my own properties. But do you know who Glenn Kirshner is? He's a former prosecutor. He's on MSNBC.
The name sounds very familiar.
He's a shaved head guy. He hates Trump. He's a prosecutor that got fired by Trump, and he's got thousands of followers. But he started this podcast like in his basement with this little studio. And I guess he did his own sheetrock behind him, right? And the seams were just like horrible. And I actually.
It's a disease. Once you start noticing it, you look around.
That's all you can see.
And the flaws in everyone's texture and taping and hanging become so apparent. It's like, if you ever cut down a tree with a chainsaw.
Yes. Yeah.
And
it was wonderful.
Once you learn how to use a chainsaw and how to properly take down a tree, you can't stop noticing the cuts in other people's stumps and evaluating them. It's like a disease that sets in. And it's the exact same way with drywall. I notice drywall everywhere that I go, and it drives me nuts.
Well, but I'm telling you, I did take down a tree. It was only about 10 inches in diameter, but probably 40 feet tall. And it was just in the woods behind my mother's house in Georgia. And I, fired up one of my dad's chainsaws, whatever. And the feeling when that thing fell and the thud it made, it was like a weird feeling of power. You know what I mean?
One of my jobs was clearing a swath for a fence line in dense woods. And
do you get over that?
But you do get a little hit of it again if you've been cutting trees and thinning and cutting trees to thin for fire safety and putting in fire line and all that. If you're doing that for a while, but if you get a really good aimed directional fall and put especially a large or complicated tree exactly where you want it to go, you get that hit again.
Okay.
I think that's the main reason why guys get more and more advanced chainsaw and falling qualifications is they have to keep achieving greater technical mastery of felling trees in order to keep getting that high from I cut that tree down.
Man, and it is a real high. It's amazing. And when the coronavirus thing started, they ranked the most dangerous occupations to the least
Longer
dangerous.
Is one of the worst in the country, along with crowd fishermen.
But as far as catching coronavirus, they were the absolute lowest. Because they're out there in the woods.
That's just like how Wyoming got a horrible score nationwide for social distancing. And it turns out the algorithm that was actually kind of terrifying and Orwellian, the algorithm that was using supposedly anonymized data tracking cell phone use to determine if people were social distancing more.
Right. Yeah.
Wyoming was by default basically as socially distanced and bubbled as you could possibly get in your day-to-day life already. So they changed almost nothing when coronavirus first happened and got an F- in the 50-state ranking for how well states were doing at socially distancing and isolating and bubbling. Because they changed almost nothing at all because they were already the most isolated you could get outside of the bush in Alaska.
Their number One, they are the worst place to ride that's the worst state to ride a bicycle in the country. Nebraska's number 2. But, anyway, my friend went to Laramie, whatever that is. I spent some time in Laramie. I got into a bar fight in Laramie.
Oh, that's a terrible place to get into a bar fight.
This guy, I mean, we were obviously not locals. And this guy came up to me. I think it was actually the Long Branch Saloon. And he comes up to me and he says, "Hey, what do you think about that girl over there? She's pretty hot, isn't she?" And I go, "I don't know. What, Yeah, fine. She's fine." He said, "Well, that's my sister."
Well, congratulations. You're pretty fine looking yourself. You got some good genes. Have a beer.
I can see why you're so attracted to her. No, and then it literally, it was like 32 below zero. Literally, it was like one of those cold nights. But everybody was like taking off all their mittens, and it turned out everybody started fighting everybody, and my friends and I, we just kind of like ducked while the things were flying, and we walked out of the street and escaped fairly unwounded. The guy punched me, but I had like a down jacket on and all this stuff. Didn't really hurt. And then I realized I'd left my this was a long time ago, like $100 deerskin down mittens, like on the table. And we had to go back in to get them. And the bar fight is still going on. And I'm like, I'm like ducking things getting thrown across the room, and I got my mittens and we got out of there. What a town Laramie is. I'm telling you.
I have a quick Wyoming Stewart story.
Okay.
Before you go to turn your heat on. Stewart once allowed himself to be directed, and probably, how far did we drive trying to find the world's most rural Burger King?
What are you talking about?
When Stewart got told where the Burger King was by the rancher Wyoming? In the middle of nowhere in Wyoming.
and we had to wait for the herd of sheep to pass by the road.
Yes.
Didn't we say it like that? I think
that guy was screwing with you.
He was kidding. It was a
he stopped in the middle of nowhere and asked a rancher working on fence on the side of the road, driving through desolate Wyoming, if there were any places like nearby that had like fast food. And the rancher went, "Yeah, there's a Burger King just a little while that way."
Just keep going.
We went that way. And it wasn't until we were stopped on the road for an hour for a sheep crossing that he began to consider that he might have been pulling his leg.
Oh my God.
He took it completely at face value. And this was so, like, that night on that highway was the clearest view of the Milky Way I've ever had in my entire life. Like, we were so far from any kind of civilization.
We were far out by Montana standards.
We were in the middle of nowhere by rural Montana, Wyoming, and Wyoming standards.
Wow.
Like, we were in desolate nothing.
Where did you eat that night? Did you ever find any food? Or did you just kill a sheep? And
I don't think we killed a sheep. I don't even know. I think it was at least the rest of the day before we found a town.
Wow. And what mission were you on? Where were you going?
I think he might have been looking for retreat properties in Wyoming. That was a lifelong thing, was trying to find the place where he would buy acreage, and then that would be our survival compound.
He should have taken all that money and bought some land or something.
We did have acreage outside of Eureka that we lost because his credit score was complete garbage and he never planned to keep the house. Set us up to fail on the mortgage, and now looking at the state of the housing market, if I don't manage to buy property within the next 10 years, that might be the last time anyone in our family owns property.
I don't know how anybody's going to make it the way rents and costs are going up. It's crazy. Omaha is insane. I mean, actually, I spent, when there was a lull in the coronavirus thing, I got vaccinated early and spent April, May, and June roaming around the country on trains with my bicycle. and I was in all these cities, and like the downtowns are ghost towns. Downtown Chicago is a ghost town. I mean, it's these skyscrapers everywhere, but I think they're going to have to turn them into apartments or something. I mean,
they're all being bought by massive investment corporations, and a lot of it is Saudi oil money because Saudi Arabia is terrified of the electric car. They're putting the Saudi investors are putting a ton of money into something that traditionally holds its value, which is American real estate, and that's starting the domino chain that is leading
they
to
were
all
buying
kinds of
farmland
retirees going out into the sticks and buying houses with cash.
I have a Saudi story, and then I promise I'll hang up. The Saudis came to
You
Chicago to buy, and I don't know if this is a joke, but they, there's Irish bars all over Chicago, and the guy's like selling his bar to the Saudis, and he invites them there on St. Patrick's Day. The Saudis don't know what St. Patrick's Day is, and the guy thinks, wow, this is this thing is a money machine. But they were buying up Iowa farmland in the 60s and 70s, the Saudis.
Yep. A ton of downtown Canadian properties are owned by Chinese investment firms.
Oh my God, don't bring that up around Adam. That's all he wants to talk about is the Chinese buying up Canada.
Well, they're one of the only countries with a worse housing market than us right now.
Oh, I know that have you seen they're tearing down entire cities? That they built like gigantic skyscrapers that have nobody in them. And that whole thing is
all over
collapsing.
China, there are shoddily built, just like Las Vegas, just before the collapse, just before the economic collapses. That's one of the things making me nervous about right now in the construction industry. It feels like
I was there. There were cranes everywhere in Las Vegas right before the collapse.
The fundamentals behind the market are supposedly different, but it feels weird.
Yeah.
And like in Las Vegas, they had projects already paid for. It was more expensive to break the contract than it was just finish the development. So there were housing developments that were being built out into the deserts and strip malls and skyscrapers that were going up and never inhabited. And they were being built cheap and shoddy. And they were basically ghost towns from the moment that ground was broken while the collapse was happening. And it was just cheaper to let the momentum continue. And there's entire cities in China that are from beginning to end almost totally uninhabited because they are all real estate speculation properties. Just ghost cities, almost totally abandoned, like something out of the Chernobyl exclusion zone, but just like economic fallout instead of radioactive fallout.
Crazy.
And they're all falling apart because they were never actually built for human habitation.
So they were like fake buildings almost.
They're spec house scam cities.
Yeah. All right, Dakota. I literally it's like getting into the 50s now in here. So
okay.
Great talking to you. I will be in contact with you, Twitter DM, to set up the actual podcast.
And we'll go over a list of bullet points to address before Tangent Town.
Yes, exactly. Well, I couldn't do this on my own.
On daily life with Stewart before we get into my conspiracy theory on Stewart's involvement in J6 and his involvement with the FBI.
I think that'd be fascinating.
Help set the stage for why I don't think he was a cultivated asset.
What are we going to do about the dog during this interview?
Yeah, I'll figure something out. The dog is particularly restive today.
Maybe you can go to your...
He's losing his mind all day. I can go...
Can you go to your outbuilding, maybe?
I can go to my outbuilding, and that should be a lot better. I just didn't have time to set it up. I just walked in from work.
That's okay.
I've got drywall.
Are you a volunteer? Are you a VFD guy?
Yes.
Oh, so you're a heavy drinker.
This is actually a
Gold Hill
wildfire like T-shirt. It's just one of the ones they sell at a booth outside the fire camp when there's a big incident.
Okay.
That was outside of Libby. That was 2 years ago.
I couldn't be in the VFD. They drank too much. That their meetings were all like
there are
beer
some.
drinking.
My department isn't like that. There are some departments around here that have beer can vending machines, and some of the people I've hung out with for like going to training seminars and conventions, those are the only times in my life I've ever gone binge drinking because they party harder than anybody else I've ever met.
Yeah,
Some of these department guys.
Crazy. All right, I'm going to hang up.
Okay, please do.